Vicky.
I've
Okay.
got it going.
All right, cool. I'd like to thank everyone for being here today for our Lunch and Learn. This week, we are starting I guess you would say, our revisiting those speakers that have programs that were part of our Encountering Innovation conference. We talked about that the various speakers were part of the ecosystem that we are working toward making a normal presence for us. We added matchmaking this year to our tech transfer, and what we're really trying to achieve is giving our different small businesses a variety of opportunities as they look to commercialize their innovation, or as those that are looking to find opportunity in their advanced manufacturing. So we're trying to create, some call it a collision, intentional engagement, or as we've called it, encountering innovation. So we're excited today. Laurie Moncrief will be introducing our speaker. We've had a chance to spend some time with him, and we look forward to engagement with you. So I'm going to encourage you, each of you, as you have questions, feel comfortable either typing them in the chat and sending them up, or if you want to raise your hand or unmute and ask the question. I've asked Max to consider this a roundtable conversation where we can have a good interchange of thoughts and solutions to the engagement with NASA. With that, Laurie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Alan. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you for supporting having Maxwell on, because I think that iTech is a great program for small businesses. I know I work with a lot of the SBDC counselors and small businesses, and I got to tell you, this is a program that we should really be encouraging our small businesses to sign up for. So Maxwell Briggs is the director of the NASA iTech program out of NASA headquarters. And I'm going to tell you that Maxwell is super supportive of small businesses, and he is gracious enough to always make himself available if people have questions or if we want him to present. He has been just awesome in making himself available to do that. So I'm offering that up. If any of you want more information about NASA iTech, to reach out, Max will tell that himself to you guys, but I can't reiterate how great he's been to work with. So with that, I'll turn it over to Maxwell.
Thanks, Laurie, and thanks for having me. For those who were at Encountering Innovation, you will probably notice that the charts that I'm going to present here are going to be similar, but I'm going to try to present them in a new with a slightly different narrative here today. So hopefully even the people who have seen the charts before can get something out of it. I'm actually having a little bit of a tough time getting the right set of charts to come up here. So I'm going to improvise. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So, I'm here to talk to you guys today about how NASA engages entrepreneurs. And I do want to start with kind of the same thing I talked about at the Encouraging Innovation Conference, is trying to distinguish between the way NASA innovates and the way the private sector typically innovates. And so, so we have this question of, is NASA innovative? And then we go on and you can say, certainly NASA is innovative, right? When you see an organization that can land a car on the surface of Mars through an incredibly complicated series of things like aerobraking and hypersonic parachutes and sky cranes, and then have a Martian helicopter take off after that, you say, for sure, right? NASA is a very innovative organization, but we're not innovative in the same ways that the private sector is typically innovative. So look to solve problems that nobody else is looking to solve, and that comes with challenges that nobody else faces. But that doesn't necessarily require the type of innovation that you would see in some other sectors. A lot of times what it actually requires is innovation around risk reduction. And so how are we going to make this? So Perseverance is a multi-billion-dollar program that has to work. It has to get to its destination. And so you're innovating to try to make something incredibly reliable, right? And you cannot send it to the surface of Mars, watch it blow up, learn from it, and try it again, right? That is just not the risk profile that NASA is capable of taking. So then you can kind of, you can, on the other hand, you can take kind of some of the innovation that goes on in the private sector. You see innovations even in space with companies like SpaceX, where they do take that approach, where they want to land their solid rocket boost, their first stage boosters back on Earth for reuse. And what did they do? They blew up several of them in their attempts, and they learned from that. But that private sector innovation, the pace, the speed, the efficiency of building new things, getting back on the launch pad, learning, that is something that the private sector is capable of doing in a way that NASA oftentimes is not. And so the question that I pose, or the example that I give, that is one of the reasons why if we want to stay innovative as an organization, we have to engage the private sector that has these efficiencies, these flexibilities, the agility, and sometimes the ability to attack a market that is not in need of such high level of reliability as we are here at NASA. So we need to be able to engage innovators from the private sector. And when we do that, we also need to, the private sector innovators have a different set of needs and a different set of objectives from innovators at NASA who are largely mission driven. So when we start to create problem statements with the goal of tapping into this awesome innovation arm that is the US innovation ecosystem, we need to understand that it cannot be a one-way street. We cannot be consumers of innovation. We have to be cultivators of innovation. We have to choose problem statements that are of interest to both NASA and private sector innovators. Most of the times this is, I would say most of the time it is small business. I mean, and certainly in the programs I'm involved in, it's always small business. So how do we do that? Well, I'm guessing that most people here are familiar with the SBIR program, but if you're not, the SBIR program is an awesome program that NASA uses for several different reasons. But it's essentially, it goes from kind of an angel fund in phase one to do
Hey, Max.
Yes.
I hate to interrupt you, but I'm afraid you may be showing a screen that we're seeing a frozen screen of you and our Zoom screens, the people. So I'm afraid if you're starting to flip slides, we're not seeing slides.
I most certainly was flipping slides. Let me see.
That's what I was afraid of. I thought, yeah, this is, you were just kind of chatting at first, and I thought, oh, it looks like you're going into the presentation. We were seeing what is it, the Brady Bunch?
Yeah, we were seeing Lori Moncrief front and center, and it was not pretty. I was like, oh no,
there we go.
Me.
Can you guys see this now?
Yes. Yeah, there's the screen. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, so if anyone was interested in seeing pretty pictures, there's Perseverance. There's some SpaceX things blowing up, and now we are all the way to my SBIR chart. So SBIR phase one at NASA, it varies agency to agency, but at NASA we offer $125,000 of non-dilutive funding in phase one, $750,000 also non-dilutive in phase two. Once you get past phase two, the goals of the program are either to infuse, meaning get that technology into the hands of a project or a program or a mission Phase 3 is really meant for NASA to not be a developer of the technology anymore, but to become a customer of the technology. But there are also other ways you can continue development through things like Phase 2 sequentials, which can actually be very large amounts of funding, I believe up to $3 million, maybe $5 million, depending on the year. But there's also a series of programs such as Phase 2 EX and CCRPPs that also provide large levels of matched funding for the purpose of commercialization, wanting to push technologies out into a commercial market. So I wanted to show this. This is an example chart of all of some of the successes on Perseverance that SBIR has created. These are all SBIR companies that have, some of them have gone on and are no longer small businesses. They're quite large, but the technologies originated from SBIR. And when you originate a technology within SBIR, you have what they call Phase 3 rights. Phase 3 rights allow you to get a contract with the federal government without competition. They can sole source the contract to a company simply by just saying that the technology has matured through the SBIR process. And those Phase 3 rights are actually transferable across agencies. So if you have, and you do not need to have gone through a Phase 2 in order to get a Phase 3. So if you get a Phase 1 SBIR with the DoD and you think it's applicable to a NASA innovation, you can come up to NASA, and if we want it, if a mission or a project wants it bad enough, they can go ahead and they can directly fund you for a sole source contract using the Phase 3 funding mechanism. It really is a pretty powerful tool to get technologies infused into missions. But a lot of times, there's only one Perseverance rover, right? Some of the examples of the companies that are here, they made a technology that is specific to the Perseverance rover and doesn't really have a whole lot of commercial applications outside of the Perseverance rover. That's not always the case, though. There are several examples, Air Squared being one, ATI Industrial Automation, and Photon Systems. All of their technologies actually were either spun in from a commercial use case or after development through NASA are being spun out for applications such as medical imaging, terrestrial industrial automation and robotics, and actually wastewater testing and analysis. So a lot of those things are actually what we would consider dual use technologies and ones that where the market for Perseverance may be a market of 1 or 2 or 5 or something like that, but the market for the terrestrial use cases can be quite a bit larger. But how do we make those things? How do we get more examples of SBIR contributing to commercial markets? So NASA doesn't only have what we would consider traditional missions. When you think of NASA's traditional missions, you probably think of people on the moon or the ISS or the Hubble Space Telescope taking pictures of deep space, and those are all awesome things that NASA is probably best known for. But there's lots of other things that NASA is responsible for that are part of NASA's missions and objectives. The picture that you see right here is actually the X-59. It is a supersonic. It's meant to model the acoustics of supersonic overland passenger aircraft. The goal being to allow people to go from to allow passenger air traffic overland at supersonic speeds, which is something that was not allowed for the Concorde. So the way to do that, you have to get the acoustic signature down to an acceptable level, and so that's considered an emerging market in aeronautics. NASA does not have to, if there are technologies that are developed through this process. NASA is not going to purchase those technologies. There's not going to be a NASA mission that flies passengers from New York to LA in an hour. That is not going to happen. The goal of NASA is to develop those technologies so that overland supersonic market is real. It becomes something that the United States can lead in and take advantage of. So stimulation of the market becomes the actual goal. And that's not just the case for Aero. There are other programs within NASA, including LEO commercialization. That's commercialization of low Earth orbit. They're looking to create destinations and applications for low Earth orbit as a place that can be used for, whether it's for communications as it's typically used now, or possibly even manufacturing. They're looking to spur the markets and the capability in low Earth orbit so that new business models can take hold. Some of that involves launch costs or cost to return payloads from low Earth orbit down to Earth, things like that. But there's lots of examples of situations where NASA doesn't necessarily have to be the customer. It doesn't have to land us on the moon or on Mars in order for it to be part of something that NASA is responsible for. And that gives us the ability to fund some things that are actually considered pure market stimulation. And so along those lines, we are developing mechanisms within SBIR that we think could be more attractive to entrepreneurs. We're trying to make the SBIR program develop mechanisms that are more focused on commercialization, that are faster. And one of the things that the SBIR program gets criticized for fairly frequently at NASA is being high barrier to entry and being opaque, meaning people don't frequently have a person that they know of that they can get in touch with. A lot of times when you submit an application to NASA, it's the first time your words are ever being seen by anyone at NASA. It feels like a cold call, and it feels like it has advantages for insiders who have already been winning awards. And so we wanted to develop mechanisms that would allow this to would allow for a more friendly front door for companies, especially companies that are targeting commercialization focused objectives. So one of the things that NASA, so I am the program executive for NASA iTech, and NASA iTech allows you to have that easy front door. So for example, you have to register in a number of different sites to be involved in the SBIR program. You have to submit a 20-page proposal. That proposal may take months to be vetted before you actually get an answer as to whether you won or not. The acceptance rate on those proposals is relatively low, so there's this high burden on the small business and a relatively low probability of success. And so that can be really discouraging for companies. And many companies come to us and say, hey, I would like to know ahead of time, do I have a chance? How do I need to tweak this technology, or what would I have to do in order to make this of interest to NASA? So NASA iTech provides you a forum for that. So you come in, you apply, it's a 5-page maximum application. The application that we ask for is typically something that you guys have already had. It's part of your capability statement. It's part of your kind of business plan. It's part of your pitch deck. We want to see, we don't want this to be something that you have to dedicate. You don't have to hire a proposal writer to come and do this for you. You don't have to take an engineer off of R&D work in order to push them into this, to do this proposal for weeks. So you give us what you have, perhaps tweaked slightly in order to make it of interest to NASA, but not going completely out of the realm of what your typical pitch. So the NASA iTech currently has an open solicitation. It's at nasaitech.org. It has 4 focus areas: enabling technologies for the commercialization of low Earth orbit. I talked about that a little bit. There are several specific technology requests within that you guys can take a look at. Hybrid electric aircraft technologies and alternative fuels. There's a desire to bring down the emissions of aircraft by 50%. And one way to possibly do that is to use a combination of hybrid electric architectures and alternative fuels. Physics-based or physics-constrained machine learning and artificial intelligence. And then also technologies that use NASA data to foster climate resilience, either for long-term climate change or acute threats such as forest fires. There's also, and very importantly, not shown here, these are the actual focus areas, but we have another category called X-Factor Innovations. And X-Factor Innovations is meant to attract companies that, NASA doesn't always know all of the solutions that exist. You may have an idea that NASA really should be considering and is not. Maybe we don't even know to ask for it. Or maybe we do ask for it, but this is the right forum for you to really vet the idea So people who have an idea that doesn't necessarily fit into one of the 4 focus areas can still apply through the X Factor focus area, or the X Factor avenue within NASA iTech. So I'm fairly frequently I'm asked kind of, well, why should I participate in iTech? iTech it convenes a forum, and you basically get to pitch a diverse group of people, but there's no funding involved. And so sometimes the funding, if there will be funding to companies that participate in iTech, it would come in the form of future contracts or future SBIRs, things like that, especially as we start to align iTech more closely with SBIR. But so sometimes people can get discouraged and say, oh, well, it's going to be this time commitment, and why should I do it? And my answer to that is kind of on this chart. I mean, if I told you that I could get you a meeting tomorrow with the center chief technologists and deputies at the Marshall Space Flight Center, the Kennedy Space Center, the Ames Research Center, the NASA Glenn Research Center, the Stennis Space Center, and the Armstrong Flight Research Center, and that it would also be attended by the director of the Applied Sciences, the program director and program manager of Applied Sciences, the person in charge of the hybrid electric and alternative fuels programs at NASA, the lead data scientist at Ames, and the program executive for LEO commercialization. If you could have the floor and make your pitch to those people, if you have technology that's viable in that space, I think that would be a meeting you'd like to take. And that's not even counting. That's only the NASA folks that are involved in the meeting. The NASA name is a pretty powerful name, and the iTech network has been built over several years, and we get a very impressive array of investors, and not just investors, also collaborators, people that can kind of connect the dots for your company. So we've got organizations represented, several investors, several industry leaders. We have Ball Aerospace, Bastille, Space Technology Holdings, people that invest directly in space relevant technologies, Disrupt Tech, Tampa Bay Wave, which it primarily, well, I don't want to say primarily, they do a lot of different innovations, but many of them are in the medical sector. And as we'll start to see a lot of times people think of NASA very much in a overly specific way in what kinds of innovations we need. But I encourage you guys to look at this. And I'm sorry, and my finishing that thought is that medical devices and medical astronaut health is a big thing for NASA. And so a lot of times I ask you guys to broaden your perspective on what may be relevant. But I invite you guys to take a look at this list. This list is actually growing. It's not complete, but these are the types of people that you're going to be able to pitch in front of. Potential funders in the form of investors, but also potential funders in the form of program executives and people that may be responsible in the future for either SBIR funding decisions or programmatic funding decisions for actually onboarding technologies into missions. To give a few success stories here, I'll say a few examples. And really what I'm going to try to drive home here is a little bit of that variety that I was just talking about. Is people really have this, people have a perception of NASA as, oh, they need rockets, they need spacecraft. Well, one of the winners of our prior cycle or our prior forum events is a company called Full Cycle Bioplastics. They upcycle basically mixed use plastic waste streams here on Earth in order to try to get rid, not only replace single-use plastic bags and single-use plastics, but also to do it using the waste that's created from those streams. So you kill two birds with one stone. Why does NASA care about single-use plastic bags? Well, carrying mass to space is extremely expensive. And so the more you can reuse anything, the better off you are. And so full circle economy kind of thinking is extremely important when you go to space. So if we can reuse food packaging and turn that food packaging into 3D printed tools or radiation shields or what have you, those become extremely valuable for us. We have, as I said, medical companies like OsteoDX, who's working on trying to figure out better, advance the state of the art for bone density scanning. Why do we care about bone density scanning? Because astronauts in low gravity experience a massive amount of bone loss. And so identifying what the risk factors are for that person, either upon return to gravity or while still in transport, is valuable to NASA. We have companies like Enduralock. Enduralock won one of our forums, and they have essentially tried to they've innovated on the simple nut and bolt, a way that that makes it more vibration resistant, and that company has gone on to get contracts with the Air Force and is looking to certify their product for use in a range of aeronautics applications. Oxos Medical is looking for, it just got FDA clearance for their handheld portable, essentially X-ray machine. Why do we care about that? Well, form factor. We're going to need to do medical diagnostics on long duration space travel, and we're not going to be able to bring up full large X-ray machines with us. So that becomes extremely valuable. Another example is Daimler. Daimler is a company that is now partnered with Honeywell to, they essentially use UV light to disinfect airplane cabins. And that became very important post-COVID, to be able to clean the planes in between passengers leaving and the next group coming in. But that is directly relevant to goals that NASA has in aeronautics. People forget that the first A in NASA is aeronautics. So we have lots of responsibilities in aeronautics. But as we start to have things like Gateway is essentially a space station that would be in cislunar space. And it's going to be unmanned for a long time. And it's going to need to be cleaned autonomously in between, trips when astronauts are going there. And so could this UV technology be automated, put into a robot that can actually keep sterile environments in space with less work from our astronauts and less risk for sickness and infection? That's what we're looking for. And the point here is that not everybody has to be making rockets in order to have an avenue into NASA. So I wanted to one thing that some people have also you may have noticed in those examples. Not a lot of those examples show current right now companies on contract with NASA. That is something that we are working on in iTech, is coordinating our iTech program better with our SBIR program. And I think this is a real value proposition for companies that want to engage in iTech. Is you are getting the iTech program is now going to be, it's actually managed under the SBIR program. iTech is considered to be a feeder for specific elements of the SBIR portfolio that are looking to attack commercializable problems. So we're usually not looking for a company that says, I solve this hyper-specific NASA problem. We're looking for a company that solves problems for NASA and in a viable commercial market, for which NASA is either one of many customers or is not a customer at all. We're looking simply to stimulate the market. So you're going to be able to come to iTech. You're going to be able to hear from the people that are authorities on NASA's needs and NASA's future desire to fund. And so you're going to have a leg up when it comes to writing those applications for future SBIR or other types of proposal mechanisms. So to finish up, in order for us to stay innovative in the sense that the private sector considers innovative, as in fail, improve rapidly, and stay on the cutting edge, we need your help. And we would like you guys to engage with us. And one of the easiest ways for your program or for your companies to engage with us is through our entrepreneurial engagement programs, such as NASA iTech. iTech is a great first step for people that maybe aren't familiar with government contracting, or people that want to get a meeting with a group of investors and NASA stakeholders that they might not be able to get on their own. NASA iTech has an open solicitation right now, but it closes October 15th. But don't let that discourage you. Oh, I don't have enough time. That's not true. You have plenty of time. We're not asking for 40-page white paper on these things. We are looking for you guys to give us 5 pages, capability, how it applies to NASA, what it can do for us, what your convince us that we're not going to be the only people expected to fund this, that you have that you will have, if you don't have investor interest now, that you, by the time it matures through perhaps phase 1, phase 2 SBIR kind of prototype development stage, that you're going to have a real interest from the private sector, either customers or investors. So that does it for my talk. I'd like you to come talk to us, either through applying to NASA iTech if you think your technology is a fit, or we have time right now to discuss any of the questions that you guys may have about iTech or NASA or entrepreneurial engagement at large within the agency.
So we've got a few questions already in the chat, Max. I don't know if you can see them or if you want me to read them to you.
Let me see. I can. So who are the reviewers going to be for our submittals? I'm assuming that refers to NASA iTech. So the reviewers are going to, so most of the people that are listed on that PowerPoint chart, those are what we consider to be our judges. So most of the, we have judges and we also have roundtable participants. So essentially iTech does its judging. We do not want the NASA folks to be making judgments about the business's viability, because NASA is really good at figuring out what NASA needs. It's really good at, you know, defining what the state of the art is, at least as it relates to NASA's use cases. But we aren't as good at understanding what the competitive environment is, or what portion of a total addressable market is actually an achievable market share for a company. And so we leave that to our investors. So we have an investor portion of the judging process, and we also have the NASA SME or the NASA chief technologist. So basically and they are specialized. So not all of those people will be judging every proposal, but those people will be judging within their own specialties. Let me see. Jen says you can apply and participate in this even if you're not. Yeah. So Jen is making the point that we are coordinating better between NASA iTech and SBIR, but for the company, for companies that are out there that do not have any interest in the SBIR program, that is absolutely right. iTech is a way for you to engage NASA or engage this investor community. SBIR does not have to be the next step. So iTech is looking to provide next steps for the companies. Hopefully there's next steps with NASA, but if there's not, there's next steps with an investor. That's great too. You know, we want to see you guys succeed in NASA relevant industries. And so some companies that come through NASA iTech, that some of them are Series C companies who aren't interested in $1 million of SBIR money. That's just not where they are. They're looking to try to, you know, scale up their, they're looking for new sales paths there, and that's fine. NASA iTech is also an organization that basically tries to give people, answer the question, is NASA interested in what I have, right? So, so you don't have to, even though we are coordinating better with SBIR, that's not our only focus. Come here if you're interested, if you have a commercializable technology and you're interested in engaging with NASA.
Max, I want to read you another question because I jumped in and answered it, and I just want to make sure that I gave them the correct information. But the question was, is NASA iTech analogous to XTech, which is an Army program, and AFWorks, which is an Air Force program? And I want to make sure you answer that. I probably shouldn't have jumped in and answered it myself, but.
Yeah, so here's what I'll say about, so the DoD is what I would consider to be an organization that's hyper focused on infusion. They're if you listen to AFWorks' mantra, it's always, getting technology into the hands of the warfighter, right? That's their big thing is, and so they are looking usually a lot of times to spin in a technology that's more or less been developed. I mean, they'll fund some development, but the goal is to get it into a project. And what I would say is that NASA's existing SBIR solicitation, the one that we've had forever, that's the mechanism that we have to get technology into the hands of projects or missions, right? So I would say that iTech is similar in some ways to AFWorks, in mostly in that we are looking to engage companies that have viable commercial paths where we are not going to be the only customers. But I would say the intent of iTech and future commercialization focused SBIR efforts is not going to be hyper focused on getting technology into a mission, NASA mission. It's fine if it does. Dual use is great, right? We will do that but I think we actually have a wider mandate where we could say, hey, look, this person has a technology that enables secure automation of drones. All right, we are going to fund that. We're going to let that be funded further, taken to scale by private sector investors, and we are going to watch that technology flourish in a commercial market without ever being the customer of it, or we will be responsible for funding the development of it, but then we will be happy to go just see that thing flourish in a commercial market. So it has similarities in the types of companies it's looking for, but I would say that the end objectives are slightly different. I hope that makes some sense.
Thank you. And Alan, why don't you have Doug Slattery read? It may be easier for Max to have Doug ask the question.
There's one question that was asked that I really want to address directly. So does it function as a pre-screen for SBIR? No. So we are not even allowed to pre-screen companies in SBIR. SBIR is an open competition. It is two separate programs. So it's meant to give. It's if you want to apply to SBIR, it's not like you have to come to iTech first. The benefit is that we think you're going to have a better proposal, a better understanding of what NASA's needs are. You're likely not a NASA insider at that point. You may be putting applications in, competing with companies that have been getting NASA SBIR contracts for decades, right? And so how can we put you on equal footing with that group? Well, maybe we can start by having a conversation, right? And making sure that you guys really understand the need. But no, in the SBIR process, participation in iTech will not give you extra points or allow you to pass a filter. They're run in coordination, but it's not. iTech is not the first part of the review and selection process for SBIR.
So Doug, are you wanting to ask your question?
Yeah, I can ask it out loud. I'm fine with that. Last week I was at the Encountering Innovations event and saw your presentation there, which was great information. I appreciate you taking the time and efforts to help small businesses like us. And so we've developed IoT interoperability platform. We don't make the IoT gadgets themselves, but bring the interoperability to life in an IoT ecosystem, both hardware and software. And we noticed on the X Factor program, there's another small business in Dallas that got it accepted for their hardware platform, but they have a different application than what ours is. But since they've already been accepted and have similar hardware to us, would it make sense to collaborate with them to get our software on their platform, since our hardware has not yet been certified for extreme environments such as space? And just get some thoughts around that scenario.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, so one of the goals of iTech is to connect dots that wouldn't have been connected otherwise, right? And so if you think that there's a business opportunity for you in there, I don't know, Jen, do you recall off the top of your head the name of the company that you're interested in connecting with?
Parasanti.
Parasanti. Okay. So we, if you'd like, I'm not sure if Jen or me would be the better person to do this, but you can send some information to me. If you send a white paper, some capability statement to me, we can kind of try to see if there's an opportunity for collaboration there.
Okay.
But also, I mean, Parasanti did very well in the competition, and so within the X Factor category. So if you think that, I don't believe that Parasanti actually won, but they were very competitive. They were a good fit for X Factor. So if you think that you're kind of adjacent to them and are considering applying to X Factor, I would encourage you to do so. I think that if you can, if you have a connection to NASA for NASA relevance that's fairly similar to what Parasanti did, I think you'll you're well in the swim lane for NASA iTech.
Great, appreciate it.
So I'm not keeping up with all the questions. Do we have more? Okay, yeah, we do. Tom George asking, do you have stats on how many NASA SBIR companies have successfully transitioned the Valley of Death?
Well, so like I'm not going to be able to give you a number if you're looking for like it's 6,427. I don't have that. The program has been around since I think early 80s, maybe late 80s. I don't remember the exact date, but I mean it's billions of dollars of investment, and certainly it's certainly true that that several companies don't make it, right? I mean, that's part of the nature of early stage innovation. And it is also true that sometimes they don't make it by no fault of their own. Sometimes you get to the end of phase 2 and you've done everything that you've come to do. And for whatever reason, maybe NASA programmatics have changed, maybe there's funding cuts, maybe there's some reason, but like NASA doesn't make that leap from developer to customer. And so that's unfortunate when it happens. But I will say one thing that I can say is, so when I was working directly for SBIR, I managed the Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate's portfolio. And the Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate would grant, I don't want to misquote this number right now, but roughly 50% of the phase 1s that we awarded ended up receiving the number of post phase 2 awards that we gave was roughly half of the number of phase 1s. So that's a weird stat. It's not what you're looking for necessarily, because frequently that's not the same as saying half the companies bridge the Valley of Death, right? That's not exactly the same. Because a lot of times one company might go on to get multiple post phase 2 awards. But just to give you a general idea for kind of the number of post phase 2 contracts that we award versus like the number of phase 1s, at least in the Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate, it was on the order of about 50%. So, and now you could also argue, I mean, does that mean just because they got a post phase 2 contract where NASA projects, post phase 2 means all the money doesn't come from SBIR anymore. At least some of the money comes from the buying organization, meaning that usually that's a NASA project. So, we give out roughly 50% of those. Now, did they bridge the Valley of Death, or was that follow-on funding still trying to get them to bridge the Valley of Death? That's another question that we don't necessarily have fantastic data on right now.
I will tell you that most of the federal agencies, that's one of none of the federal agencies track that. To my knowledge, I've had that discussion at length with DOD, because small businesses get their award and then they go off and they could commercialize with something that has nothing to do with DOD, and they never know it. So they don't have necessarily, no federal agency has that feedback loop. Just FYI.
Yeah. Thank you, Lori. That's and I'm the stats that I'm giving you right there. That's only the stuff we can track, which means one of our agencies put money into these awards. If a company decided, hey, thanks for the tech development money, I'm going to go out and commercialize this. Goodbye, I don't need you anymore. We don't know about that. We have to get lucky in order to find that. That's not something the company is required to report back to us.
This is Tom again. Sorry to jump in with my voice here. But Laurie, you raise an extremely important point, which kind of points to the whole system being broken, because the government has invested, as Max said, billions of dollars in small companies through the SBIR programs. But the question, no one asked the question, what is the return on investment on that billions of dollars, right? How many of these technologies were transitioned? In the private industry, the VCs definitely ask that question because they are held to account on a daily basis on all the investments that they make. But I think the fundamental problem with the government is that very few people are accountable for the investments that are made into small companies, and therefore there is no incentive to transition those companies into products that the government can use, or maybe even private commercial sector can use.
Tom, there was a study done. I believe it was done by Tech. No, what's the group? Miltech. There are people that care about that and are working really hard, so you know, within the federal agencies to address those kinds of things and better connect those dots. They're aware of it, but it's just really challenging. The way, the world in which folks like NASA and DoD live in, a lot of things preclude them. R&E and DoD, for instance, is not allowed to go past a certain TRL level, and they act very siloed, and it's just the way they're structured. But there are folks working on changing some of those things that we know is a challenge for small business. Just know that there are people working on that.
I would also jump in and just in some ways, I would disagree with that statement almost entirely. So I, for one, think almost nothing but ROI, right? So that's something that I'm constantly thinking about. How can we make the SBIR portfolio, the Aeronautics Research Mission Directors portfolio, this commercialization focused portfolio, how can we get this to demonstrate more ROI? Some of the stats that we just gave, the 50% of, we give out about half the number of phase ones and end up getting to something where a project is able to transition, or transition from a developer to a buyer. I mean, that's a pretty strong number for the Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate. I mean, that's better than the transition rates for most VCs. Now, it's not the same type of investment. Sometimes it's a lower risk investment. So, it's not apples to apples. But there's also been several studies. For example, Science Mission Directorate would do studies on what SBIR technology is actually adding capability to a mission, right? And so that becomes very difficult. So what if you have a sensor on Perseverance, and that sensor ends up discovering water in a place that you didn't know? What's the value of that? What's the monetary value of that? How do you calculate that as an ROI? Well, there have been people who tried to actually go forward and do that, and showed a pretty nice, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, I might be able to get you the study, but the numerator in the ROI calculation is inherently more difficult because we're not actually getting dollar returns. We can't say that this company is now valued at $2 billion. But what we might be able to say is this rover never would have actually been able to get anywhere if it wasn't for these wheels. So how do you actually quantify that? It's tougher, but it's not to say that it's not being done. And I think that there is actually quite a bit of effort that goes on in the federal government to make sure that we are not wasting taxpayer dollars.
I guess the one final viewpoint I have is when you do the selections for phase ones and phase twos, they have to be done with the view that you are going to transition these technologies eventually. So things like the T&E, the test and evaluation, which are essentially responsible for the very high cost of crossing the mid-TRL value of death, because you need an order of magnitude more funding than you ever did for phase ones and phase twos, right? And no one is prepared to put up that kind of money. So I'm thinking at the selection process itself, right when the diamond in the rough is selected for being funded, either as a phase one or a phase two, you have to be thinking ahead, thinking that, hey, without the support needed to cross the mid-TRL value of death, this technology and or even this company might die, right? So
I
don't
agree with
see-
that completely.
I don't see that thinking happening with most cyber managers.
So I don't know if I would say I don't know if most of them do it. What I would say is that I would back it up even further. It's not even in review and selection. It's we shouldn't be asking for technologies that aren't high enough priority in the projects for the projects to put the money in to leapfrog it, to leapfrog the valley of death if it is successful in phase 2. I would love to see stronger commitments from projects for post phase 2 funding. So that, yeah, I agree with that. But there are practical reasons why sometimes that's not realistic. But in general, I think that you're right. The earlier you can think about what is going to happen if and when we transition, the better.
I agree. Thank you.
There are several, let's see. So I don't know if, William, if you, was your follow-up as a question on the SBIR to the iTech as a, how'd you put it like a precursor? And I'm guessing that's a question follow-up is maybe as a sounding board. Does that
Yeah.
make sense, Max?
Yes, that's what I meant.
Okay.
I think the way you described it, Max, it sounded like that's what it was, or kind of guidance, or
Yes, yeah. So I would hope that it's a little more than just a sounding board. I would hope that this conversation is more of a sounding board, but what iTech gives you is in-depth expertise from somebody who is very likely to be involved in a funding decision later on in the game should you choose to pursue an opportunity. So I would make it stronger than that. But the sounding board for me, looking at your other question, so the sounding board for me is there's a ton of vibration attenuation is a big deal on basically high precision optics. So you can't take a good picture if your camera's shaking. And some of the things that some of the instruments that are taking pictures of stars and exoplanets, some of them have dynamic hardware on them. Some of them have, for example, Brayton or Stirling cryocoolers that are used to stabilize the temperatures on the spacecraft. So the ability to reduce vibration, the transmission of vibration in those environments is crucial. So if you're asking if there are NASA applications, I mean, it depends on what vibrations you're talking about. I mean, there's also launch load vibrations, which are intense. I mean, that's a lot more serious. I mean, I don't want to say it's more serious, but it's a lot different problem to solve than, you know, a 2-watt cryocooler with a spinning turbine on it. But there are several different applications for vibration attenuation that could potentially be NASA relevant. So it could be worth a shot for X Factor. It would usually for X Factor, we like to at least have a ballpark of what you're going for. So like, yeah, is it bulk vibration for launch? Is it precision vibration, or is it vibration for precision imaging? That helps us get the right experts in the room. But yeah, if you can kind of narrow down what level of vibration or what type of vibration you're talking about, there could potentially be applications.
thank you.
So I want to ask a couple, and I hope I'm not jumping in line because I hope we cover them. One, Max, if we know of someone that's an investor that would have interest, is there a chance that they could join in the investment group, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So yes, so I would say typically our judge spots are saved for people that we are familiar with and that have engaged the program previously in like roundtable participations, or very well-established experts in the field, you know, that kind of thing. But our roundtables, if there's an investor that is specifically looking to invest in a technology area, and they think that they can do good for a company, either connecting them to the right people or as a direct investor or as somebody to develop an ongoing strategy with, then yes, I'd encourage them to get a hold of me or Lori or Jen Consalvo, who's also on the call. And we can figure out what's the best way for them to engage. Obviously, so everything that iTech, well, not everything, the initial presentations that iTech does, they're all made public. There's also a behind the scenes roundtable discussion, which is not public. But so those are kind of the levels. Anyone is welcome to watch, right, and see what kinds of presentations there are, what kinds of questions are asked. That's for anybody. But if people wanted to be invited to those behind the scenes kind of activities, we'd get you involved with the team. We'd make sure that it's a good fit on both sides.
Okay. Another question for those that apply that are not selected, what is the benefit for them applying?
If they apply and are not selected, what's the benefit for them applying? Well, I suppose in some ways it can depend on why they weren't selected. If a company is not selected because they're considered to be beyond the point that iTech can help them, perhaps that there would be some ability to flag the company for awareness to NASA or something like that. But I would say, most of the benefit of participating in iTech is actually being at the event and participating. Not being accepted probably doesn't lead to nearly the types of benefits that you would get if you were.
So let me ask maybe a different way. How much feedback will they get besides not being selected? I
see. Okay. So the truth of the matter on that is that the process that we go through, it's done through a collaborative agreement with the National Institute of Aerospace, and the initial screening of applications goes through kind of a commercial review panel from the NIA. I don't think we have anyone from the NIA on the call right now, but I am not sure what degree of feedback companies get when they are not selected. Jen or Lori, I don't know if you guys know that. That's probably a Harla question, but I'm sorry, I don't.
That's definitely a Harla question.
I was going to say Jen would know it better than me. So I'm a newbie, so.
That's a good, though. We can flag it and get you a better answer on that.
So I'm gonna put in a request that if they're not giving feedback, that please give feedback, because then I think then everyone benefits from applying. And if they can get some good feedback, whatever that is, I think that would be very beneficial for the application process.
That's a good point. Thank you. And we'll check that to see if I know that the review comes with notes, comments, and all that stuff. I don't know how much of that is fed back to the companies.
Okay.
We'll definitely bring that up with Harla. Harla's our lead. So
Another question, Anne is asking, can folks reach out to you via email with questions that might arise in the future?
Yes. I can put it in here.
Is your contact information in the PowerPoint?
It's not in the PowerPoint, but it is publicly available on, if not the NASA iTech, NASAitech.org is the primary site for iTech. I'm not 100% sure if it's on that site or if it's on the nasa.gov site, but in any case, I put it in the chat. So everybody.
There you go. I was going to say, if you want to, if you'll share your PowerPoint with us where we can have it, if that's good, then if you want to add it on the final slide or something, if you feel like it, that'd be fine too. Cool. One application per category. Is there a limit to the applications? How does that work?
If you have, it would be interesting to me to see what companies are out there that have a technology that they are focused on commercializing in both hybrid electric aircraft and AI machine learning. It's not common, I'll say that. We will look at we'll look at both applications or multiple applications, but that's not all that common, or hasn't been to this point.
So I'll follow up with a question with that. Could it be detrimental by applying for more than one category?
So the initial screening, as I said, is usually done by NIA and does not involve. I'm not involved in the selection process. I mean, I don't have a vote, is what I mean. But the only way I could see it being detrimental is if it is you know how, I mean, some investors will come in and say, well, what's your first your minimum viable product, and what market are you targeting with that minimum viable product? And if your answer is, I'm going to attack all markets, all possible markets with my minimum viable product, there's a question of whether you know what you're doing, right? Or whether you have any real plan or path forward. So if somebody gets the impression that your commercialization plan is unfocused, then I could see that possibly. But if it's two very well thought out things, or maybe if they're adjacent and you say, hey, look, you know, I'm going to apply to X factor for this, but a spin-off of it is actually a very focused application in this. And if there's no real evidence that it's a problem with the company or the strategy, then there'd be no reason you would get points deducted per se.
Vicky, do we have any other questions?
Jen had a good comment in there. If you're not sure, talk to Jen. If you say, hey, look, I've got this application and this application, I'm considering putting them both in, we might be able to give you some guidance and say, hey, look, that one's not what we're looking for. This one's right up our alley. You know, we might be able to save you some time there.
Yeah, that was the last question.
Okay, good.
Other than Kelly did ask a question, and I think Jen did respond to it, but she was asking about protection, IP, patent protection, and that prior to applying, if you should have that, since some of those are public, the presentations are public.
Yeah, you should. So you're going to be presenting, and those presentations will be made public. And they will be put on the web. So when you are presenting to iTech, we make this very clear in our statements. You should be presenting only stuff that you are comfortable with everybody knowing. Now, once we go into the roundtables, that's no longer public, but the roundtable participants haven't signed NDAs. So you are still on the hook to protect your own intellectual property.
Any other
Alan,
questions?
what do you think? Any more?
So if we don't, I will say that on the questions, I don't know if anyone or if everyone can see them, but Max, we asked 2 questions beyond our normal. Are you going to apply for NASA iTech? And we have 8 out of 14 saying yes. We have 4 out of 14 saying no. And we have 2 out of 14 saying maybe. Then we asked the question, which is the part that the SBDC counselors would play, is would you want assistance? And 7 out of 14 said yes. So we've got half of them looking for assistance. So I'm going to ask a question of you. Would you want to, and do you have time? Would it make sense? So that's kind of a 3-part question there, and you can answer it any way you want to follow up with the tech, with the SBDC advisors, those of us from various states, to where maybe a 30-minute or an hour, I don't know how long it would take, but would it make sense to bring us in and sit down with us for a short period of time and say, okay, here's some things that you can do to help your clients? And
I
if
would be
so,
ha-
we'd be glad to host that.
I'd be happy to take, I think we could get it done in a half an hour, but yeah, I think that we could, I'd be happy to make that happen.
Okay, so what I'll do then for those that are on here and then those that aren't, we'll be glad to send an email out. If you want to look at at your time frame, I would imagine we don't need to push it out too far because we're going to be hitting October fairly quickly, but maybe the middle to latter part of next week where we can kind of mash it up and get people in there.
Yep.
Okay. Well then, Vicky, can you you're shaking your head. Do you have time to do that? Okay, cool. Well, that way we'll serve those that answer the questions. Now, for those that answered the questions, I don't know who answered which way. If you're looking to apply and you're looking for assistance, you need to let us know in some fashion where we can be helping you. So if you've got your tech, and if you want to let us know who that person is you're working with, where we try to ensure that they're on with Max, we'll be glad to follow up with that as well.
I got an answer to the question as to whether the applicants receive feedback, and the answer is that only if they are selected as a finalist. So the top 10 that participate in the event definitely get feedback. The other applicants do not, just so you know.
Okay.
I just had Harla I emailed the question to Harla, and so that's the answer.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
We're technically in overtime. Bill's not here today to spank us. Bill Carey tries to keep us to where we can make sure everybody's in voluntary sitting around the table after 1. So Max, I do thank you for your time sincerely. I think this was very well received. I took a lot of notes. Hopefully with the answers, we've got some good participation coming.
Got a
Sounds good.
question wanting to know where they apply.
I'm typing it, Vicky, right now. I'll type it. How
Thank
about
you.
that? Is that all right? Did you want to say
Yep.
something else, Max? I'll just type it on there. If you
Oh,
want.
no, I was just pulling it up. I was going to drop it in the chat myself.
Okay.
So,
And we'll be glad to post this as on our website. We'll reach out to our folks for the Encountering Innovation. And we have an events page. We'll be glad to refer directly to your location if you'd like us to.
that'd be perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
This is awesome. I can't thank you enough, Max, for doing this. I'm sure the small businesses were thrilled to see you and have this opportunity. So thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys are working on. I appreciate it.
Thank
Bye.
you very much.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
So basically what we need then is to think of our various states. And I would also add all of those that are our business advisors that want to participate with Kansas. So like Mark.
Well, what I thought is I just go through the list of everybody that participated in EI.
There you go. Yeah, that'd be perfect.
And what I'll do is I'll just send out an email saying that we're looking at scheduling this. And I just removed it.
Yeah, just say it's a short turnaround. This is going to be quick.
We're scheduling a meeting. When would you have I'll ask Maxwell what times will work best with him first.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
And that'll be great.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we had a good answers. I don't know
Yeah.
how many of them are the Kansas folks. I'm a little concerned I didn't want to ask, I did want to ask, but I didn't. And I'd like to know how many people are, what's the application versus the ratio to those, to the 10? How many apply versus the 10 finalists? And I don't know what that is. There's Laurie. Hold on a second. Yes, ma'am.
I'll deny I said this, okay?
Okay, well, I'm sitting here with Vicky still.
Oh, okay. I'm just gonna say I really like Matt. I think it's good that we have Matt.
Yeah, I think he's a good egg. Yeah, he's a good guy.
I'm telling you, I really like working with him.
I liked, yeah, his style, he's very relaxed. That's kind of my point about Trent Armbrust. He is so stiff. I don't know how to describe it. And Max is not that way at all. And
No, Trent is a military officer's son. That's all I'm gonna say.
oh, well, there you go. That probably explains a lot. Bless his heart.
Not that would explain it to you. His dad is Air
What that environment does to you.
And of the
Yeah.
forces, Air Force explains a lot.
So-
They're more so.
So anyway, we're going to follow up to let you know. Vicky's going to, we're going to reach out to Max first on some times next week when that would work for a short 30-minute. And then we can reach, Vicky said, then we'll reach out to all of our folks. If you want others on that list, like Mississippi,
Yeah,
anybody else, if you'll think through who you want and send those to us.
yeah. I think all the FPDCs that you work with should be
Sure.
invited.
Yeah.
And I'll do it. I did a full court press this time. I mean, I really expected Mississippi to be on the phone because I was on a conference call with him earlier today. And he texted me last night and said, "Get me that over. I want to be on it." But
Well, we've got it recorded. Vicky will have it wrapped up in a way that we can try to see if we can I don't know exactly how we do that other than on the website. So if somebody wants to see it quickly, if you'll let us know, if you'll let Vicky know, we'll until it's posted on the website, there's a link. And so once we've done our part, we can give them the link where they can view it to
I
catch
gotta
up.
tell you, it would be so freaking awesome if we got that many people from this applying. It would mean something to NASA, iTech, and Max.
Yeah.
They would take note. That's why I've been doing this probably annoying full court press, because if we can really have a good showing, it would be really good.
Do you know, Lori, Vicky and I were just saying this. Do you know how many apply, what the application to the finalist is? I mean, do we have 20 that apply and they pick 10, or is it like 2,000 and they pick 10?
But I'm telling you that we have had really low applications, and Max is sweating. So if we could get applications, it would knock his socks off. I'm telling you.
Okay.
I'm trying to tell all of you. And I personally, if I were an innovator, I would tell you not to sweat. You don't think you fit neatly in the 4 categories, put in for X Factor. Because, Max said, we will fund things, even if it's not something NASA's going to buy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not funding things, but he's saying if you put your name in there, NASA often gets programs rolling, even if it isn't going into NASA. And I can tell you that the team of investors that work with NASA iTech, and like Ramona is going to be there. She's from Stennis. She's wonderful. Those people pick up technology, and like Tim Fowler is so awesome, and Brett was so awesome. Some of those CTOs are like that with NASA. I've seen them work with those